worship, right? All right, the second question is, where in the Bible is religious liberty mentioned? Can you just give us a reference?
I'm not certain if you can actually find a text that says the religious liberty, but there are a number of places that we find that as a principle, there should not be any person who dictates to another person how they should worship, because that's what a religious liberty is. For instance, we find in the book of Acts, when the brothers Peter and them were being challenged by the religious leaders of that time, and then they were preaching about Jesus, and then they are approached. These men say, hey, did we not speak with you in a former time and say that you should not preach in the name of this man? And then they answer saying that it is better to obey God rather than man. So that's one instance whereby we find a principle that says that as an individual, if you believe that this is what God wants of you, there should be no other mortal or person or human that should be able to then come to you and say, you must stop that which you are doing. And specifically on the grounds of saying that this is not the way to worship and all of that, you should be able to do that. That's one instance. Another instance, for instance, that we find is the three Hebrew boys in the book of Daniel. The three Hebrew boys were living as slaves in a land, and they were told that at a certain time they must worship a certain statue and idol in a certain way, and their response was that we are not going to do that, and we would rather die if we have to, rather than go against our freedom or our right to worship God according to our dictates. Yeah, maybe let me hold it there.
Yeah, so I see religious liberty going right as way back as in the book of Genesis, when God created the universe and He created Adam and Eve, and He actually gave them a choice. He put in the tree of good and evil, and in the garden, and in the garden, Christ exemplifies, or God exemplifies, what it means to show religious liberty. If there was one person in this world that would require all the worship and can enforce worship, it would be God. But God shows us that even His creation has the ability to choose between who they want to worship. And so for me it goes back as even creation, God setting the example for us. Amen. And then right through scripture, you get it where Christ allows Cain and Abel to make a choice how they want to worship. He does not enforce it, He does not strike him dead or Cain dead, but He allows them to choose how and who they want to worship. And again, like I said, if there was someone who would be able to enforce a style of worship or worship, then it would be God Himself. And God then shows us, no, He also believes in religious liberty.
Amen. My next question is exactly on the point which you mentioned. Is there a prophetic significance on this subject of religious liberty? Does it have any prophetic significance?
Yes, definitely. As we believe as Seventh-day Adventists that before Jesus comes, there's a number of things that are going to happen. And central to those events that are going to take place before He comes is the issue, we find in the book of Revelation chapter 13 where it speaks about the mark of the beasts, the two beasts there, that effectively want to force people to worship according to a certain system that is clearly against the true worship of God. So, and that is, as I'm saying, that is in connection with the events that will take place before Jesus comes. So we do know that, without really necessarily expounding too much at this moment in time, that there is clearly a case whereby people are going to have to choose to either, in fact, people are going to be forced to either, worship according to this false worship system as presented in the book of Revelation, or if they do not do that, then they will suffer greatly and even die for that matter. So prophetically, the issue of worshiping God according to how God has presented himself to you is going to be very, very key.
Yeah, maybe just to add on that. So prophecy is basically based on history, right? So we have in the book of Daniel, chapter 3, verse 6, we have an idea of the sequence of events which we base Revelation on. And you can see as the book of Daniel opens up in Daniel 3 and 6, we have Babylon. You have the state and religion separate on its own. And then it's brought together. Right, in chapter 3 and then again in chapter 6 it's brought together. And after that, what happens after that? When state and religion combines, there's one religion. One religion is formed, state and religion combine one. And then right after that is persecution. And so what my brother has mentioned is then in Revelation, God prophesied that same sequence of events is going to come into fruition. So we can clearly see it's going to get to a point in prophetically where the church and state is going to try to combine and create one form of religion and they're going to try to enforce it according to Revelation chapter 14. But I still believe that it is our requirement to do what God would have loved us to do and keep separating the two, religion as state, and as it is in our constitution and many other constitutions around the world.
Amen. Now my next set of questions is on the role of the South African government in protecting religious liberty. So under that theme, I would like to ask the following questions. And the following question is, which type of government do we have in South Africa? Can you just explain that?
We have a democracy.
A democracy?
Yes.
Okay.
People are elected into power, and then they in fact we have a constitutional democracy, to be more specific. So we have a constitution that determines what rights people have, etc. And then people are elected to then rule. And when they rule, they cannot just rule however they please. They have to rule according to the constitution.
Yeah.
All right. And how does it function, the government itself? Can you just break down that structure for us? I know there are legislators, there's the executive, there's the judiciary. How do they function?
So maybe
and how do they make laws?
I'll answer maybe by touching on the three branches of the government. So there are three branches of the government. There's the executive, which consists basically of the president and his ministers. And then I'll come back to what they do. And then there's the legislative, which consists of parliament effectively. And then there's the judiciary, which consists of the lawyers and the courts basically, so the judges, etc. So basically I'll start with the legislative, parliament. In parliament, those are the people who actually make the laws.
Okay.
So when there is a new law, or there is a law to be amended, or whatever new law that has to be removed or added or changed, it is in parliament where that takes place. They have to debate it, etc. And then the executive effectively rules, supposed to rule, govern according to the laws that have been already stipulated in parliament. And then the courts or the judiciary, it has to make sure that the laws are being kept by everyone, including, by the way, and these bodies, they sort of like check each other. There's this idea of separation of power, just to ensure that we don't find ourselves in a situation whereby there is one person who is effectively a tyrant or one person who can go rogue. That's why we have this separation of power, whereby they can check each other in that sense.
Just to add on that, we have a chapter, we have various chapter 9 institutions. One of them is the public protector, and the other one is the Human Rights Commission, and then the third one, that's the one I want us to focus on tonight, is the CRL Commission. Yes, so can you just explain to us the function of this Chapter 9 institution? CRL, can I explain what that means?
Yes.
It's Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic Commission. Can you just explain to us the function of that commission?
Look, so I think they were placed into the Constitution in 1996. But the function basically is to protect religions, different denominations, cultures in our country. And yeah, it's funny though that the very one who is supposed to protect us and our denominations is the very one that's promoting for us and to regulate us and denominations. But basically the aim is just to protect us and make sure that we are protected against government and taxation and all these kinds of things.
Now, between 2014, 2013, I think 2013, 2014, we experienced some strange acts in South Africa in that you had pastors feeding people petrol, grass, and all these lethal substances. And now people went to complain to the Human Rights Commission and also to the CRL Rights Commission. I don't know why I am failing to pronounce this thing, but that commission. And then the commission did an investigation, and then during the investigation phase, they summoned all the religious leaders, all the pastors that were called into question. In fact, they took a sample of 85 churches in South Africa, and then they asked them various questions as to their practices. So they wanted to